And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network dedicated to covering IU women's basketball. Today is our 175th episode, recorded on the evening of Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. I'm your host, Kathy Amos, joined by my fearless co-host, Jeff Marlow. And today we'll be talking about two wins, our win over the Florida State and 76-72, and our win over Butler 53-72, improving to 5-0 record. And we will also look a little bit at our next opponent, which is Florida Gulf Coast University, or FGCU. But today, as always, we will start our show with our banner moment, like we do every moment. And Jeff, for me, I think I went back to the Florida State game, actually, with 15 seconds to go. And that was when, in that third quarter, Florida State had kind of made a big run. They made it pretty tight there going down the end. IU came back after Florida State had taken that lead, but IU came back in the fourth quarter, ended up outscoring Florida State in that fourth quarter by 10. But it was definitely a little bit tight going down to the end, and we were only up by 2 with 15 seconds to go when Journey Kiaku, who had came in off of the bench, came in and scored the layup to put us up by four points with 15 seconds to go. And I think that really sealed the game. And I really appreciated that banner moment because I'm sure we'll talk about it when we get into it. But, our team got into some foul trouble, and Journey Kiaku hadn't played a whole lot. And she came in off of the bench, and that was actually a play they were trying to run for Lene, but they couldn't get it to Lene. So Journey looked over to Coach Morin, and Morin said, go. And so she did, and she came through for us in that 15 seconds. So for me, that's our Hoosier Proud banner moment for today. And as always, our banner moment is brought to you by Homefield Apparel, the presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network. Homefield is constantly releasing new schools or updating its products for schools in its existing line. So you're bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get great quality apparel, but you're supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your entire first order. That promo code again is HOME23 for 15% off. And the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right. So we'll hit a little bit of news headlines before we kick it over to Jeff for Marlow's musings. But I do want to point out it was a close tie for my banner moment. I wanted to point out for everyone that Coach Morin reached her 250th win with the Indiana program after that Florida State win on Sunday. Then some updates real quick on some of our former alumni players around the professional leagues. So Mackenzie Holmes is currently averaging 24.4 points per game, right at 10 rebounds per game, 1.6 assists per game for Geelong in Australia. She's also playing alongside former Nebraska star Jazz Shelley, and she has been named Player of the Week twice, including this past week. Alexa Goulbe, who is playing alongside Sarah Scalia, is also having a nice year so far. Alexa is averaging 13.2 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists. Sarah Scalia on the same team is averaging 12.7 points per game, 3 rebounds per game, 1 assist per game. And both of those players are playing in Lyon, France. So those are some updates for you on our alumni players, and our congratulations out to Coach Morin. But Jeff, what's on your mind for your Marlow musings tonight?
Congrats to Coach Morin on the 250th victory. I really don't have a whole lot of musings here. Just that it hasn't been pretty at times, but undefeated at this point, and still, kind of 2 games better than we were at this point last year, where we felt a whole lot better about the season and the preseason. It's kind of a 180. We this year we come in thinking, what's this team going to be? And here we are, 4-0. Now, I admit the competition hasn't been the top level competition. Florida State, I think, will be okay, but I'm not sure they're a top 3rd ACC team. But last year we thought we were going to be pretty darn good, and kind of stumbled out of the gate with Harvard and Butler, losing 2 of the first 3, if I remember right, or 2 of the first 4. Yeah. And so here we are undefeated. We got FGS Florida Gulf Coast coming up next. I was doing a little digging as well. Kind of looking ahead a little bit to over the Thanksgiving break games, where we play down in Florida. So we got a chance here now maybe to actually be on a little bit of a run and go before we hit, really get into the meat and potatoes of Big Ten play. So I like where we're at record wise. There's some things to clean up as I'm going to come back to as we go through some of the recaps.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jeff, why don't we go ahead and jump into it? And we'll start off with the Florida State game, and then we'll come back and hit Butler. But why don't you start us off with Florida State? What were some of the things maybe that jumped out to you in the first half, or just overall themes from the game that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I watched the game, but I don't really remember it specifically by halves. I kind of look back at the box score, and the first half was pretty close. I mean, it really was. I think when I first started watching, by the time they got on, if I remember right, there was another game that ran long, and the IU women were joined kind of in progress. And so they had like a 5 or 6 point lead. But after that, it really felt like it was kind of a close half, finished a 3 point lead. My first, and I got worried, I guess third quarter was what for me, and it all worked out. And, obviously this is, I'm talking in hindsight and not in the heat of the moment now, but as I was watching the game, Florida State went on a big run for about the last 4-5 minutes of the third quarter, like 11-2, 12-1 type run somewhere in there, where they actually put the lead out. They had like a 7-8 point lead. And I kept thinking, take a timeout. And by the time we did, I felt like it had been too late. Now, we came back and made a nice run kind of beginning of the fourth quarter, but I just felt like, and my fear was this was going to be one of those games from last year. And I hate to keep kind of comparing the two, but I just, I was thinking, had a lead, tough road and, tough game on the road. I won't say a tough road environment because there was not very many people at the Florida State game. There were a lot of empty seats. I know it was a Sunday. I was real quick. Yeah. The attendance was 2,100. But it just kind of felt like that Oregon game last year. It felt like the Minnesota game where we'd had a lead and then the other team makes a run and we can't respond. So it was nice to see them make the response. I just still would have liked to see them take a timeout earlier than they did in that run by Florida State.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing when I was watching the second half. Nothing really jumped out to me either, Jeff, from that first half. It felt like a really well played game from both sides of it in terms of evenly contested. I don't remember, one team over the other. Indiana outscored them 17-12 in the first quarter, and then they outscored us 17-15 in the second quarter. So it was actually fairly even, like you mentioned, going into halftime. But like you, I felt kind of nervous after that, with the third quarter, and all of a sudden Florida State went on the big run, and it just seemed like all the momentum was in their favor. And I thought the same thing. I thought we should have taken a timeout. But hats off to Coach Moore and knowing her team, for them to come back out in that fourth quarter, and they just never gave up. And that was facing quite a bit of adversity. Like you mentioned, it was on the road. So definitely not having the home crowd behind you, even though it was low attendance. The few that were there, I felt were fairly loud. But the fouls too, right? Like we had to play a number of players way more minutes than they had been playing all year. And credit to our bench. As much as we've been kind of complaining about the bench play, I felt like they stepped up in this game. As I mentioned in my banner moment with Journey Kiyaku, she didn't play a whole lot, but she ended up playing 6 minutes. And in those 6 minutes, she ended up with a rebound and assist. She had one foul as well, but she made her one tough field goal that we needed her to make down that run. And so it was a 6 very meaningful minutes I thought we got from her. But there are a lot of players, Noyan came in and gave us 13 minutes off of the bench. Stotine came in and gave us 19 minutes off of the bench. And so a couple of those players from the bench really stepped up, in my opinion, and helped kind of bridge that gap when we needed them to with all the foul trouble. So to me, that was the big part of it. And the fact that they just never kind of wavered and they kept coming together as a team. I listened to Coach Morin's interview this week with Austin Render on the weekly talk show that they have on Inside Indiana. And she had a phrase that she used, and she called it, she said that she reminded her team of this before that game and during some of these tough times during the game, that a bundle of sticks is very hard to break, and they needed to stay playing together as a team. And I thought that was a really great analogy, and it seemed to me that it kind of showed up on the floor for us, and how they just didn't seem rattled in this fourth quarter, and were able to come back. Like I said, I think they were down by at least 5 at one point. So those were some of my highlights as well from the game. But any other highlights you want to talk about in the game, or do you want to talk through these highlights via the numbers?
Well, I guess I'll go take the other aspect. I felt like we didn't play the bench enough. If it hadn't have been for Chesky fouling out, Kyaku doesn't play. And after the first couple and maybe the first rotation, Maya Makaluski didn't play. I mean, she had 3 minutes on the night, and Faith only played mainly because of trying to bridge a couple minutes. Yeah, foul trouble.
That was the one thing with Faith. Did you notice she came in for like 1 second, committed a foul, and it got immediately yanked in the first half? And I did not like that. So totally agree with you either. But I guess what I was trying to say is I felt the bench that did get to play stepped up. So anyway, sorry, finish your thought.
They did step up, but I think I'd rather see it be from choice. I don't want it to be because there was no other choice. I want them to play because they're in that rotation. Essentially, whereas at least tonight, and we'll come back to it a little bit, tonight I felt like we had multiple players, obviously, off the bench with double-digit minutes, and I just don't see. Again, I realize Florida State's a better team than Butler, but we hadn't played. In our last show, we talked about basically only a 7-man rotation already. Yeah. I think this team's better if we play a 9-person rotation. I just like to see Coach Moore find some faith and trust, no pun intended. Find some trust in the players off the bench to at least get you 7-8 minutes a night. And with that, but I will say this, and I'll come back to this in some of the numbers, especially tonight. Some of the ones that we're yammering for off the bench, or they're getting some minutes off the bench, aren't giving us crooked numbers. We're not getting a whole lot from them. And so that I get that as a former coach. I get that if you're not, I'm putting you in, you got to be putting numbers. We used to say, put crooked numbers. Put crooked numbers up there. So, if you're putting up zeros, you're doing nothing for me. So, then anything else you want to talk about recap? Otherwise we can head on to the numbers.
No, just that's a great point, Jeff. I appreciate that. Yeah. And I meant that I thought our bench did a good job that got in there. I agree with you. I wish we wouldn't have had to play him because of foul trouble. But yeah, and I'll touch on the comment I made to my husband in the Butler game when we probably talk about our bench there. But yeah, let's go ahead and hit some of the numbers from the Florida State game in particular. So why don't you start us off, Jeff? What's the number that jumped out to you that you want to talk about?
We've kind of hinted at this: 28 fouls. They can't foul 28 times. That I get you were on the road, but you as a player, I don't even blame this on the coaching staff. As a players, you have to adjust to how the game's being called. Now, I understand you're getting some tough calls on the road. I get that. But 28 fouls, we allowed them to, luckily, it wasn't too bad because they didn't really start taking advantage of it until the second half. But in the second half alone, Florida State shot 20 free throws in the second half alone, 12 in the fourth quarter, because we were fouling, and we had a lead. Stop fouling. I get sometimes it isn't going to, you can't help it, but you got to be smarter. You can't foul when you're winning, because that stops the clock and allows them to score with the time not moving.
Yeah, that's a great point. The number for me I wanted to look at was on both sides, Indiana and Florida State, which is the 3-point shooting. So, and I thought it was positive on both sides. For Indiana, they had been struggling up until this game, really shooting the ball from downtown. And I thought they really looked a lot better. They were 7 of 18 for 39%. And, that included 3 for 3 from Lene Beaumont, especially. And so I thought that the 3-point shooting as a team looked a lot better. And on the flip side of that, their 3-point defense has been really great. In fact, I remember listening to the commentators a little bit that Florida State takes and makes some of the most threes of any of at least the ACC teams so far through the year. And they held Florida State to only 2 of 14, which was only 14%. And, we'll probably touch on a little bit maybe but just in case we don't, I heard that same kind of consistent stat listed during the Butler game. The commentator mentioned that in terms of 3-point percentage defense, Indiana's got one of the top in the Big Ten so far this year. And so I really like to see that defensive mind, especially as a team with Florida State, who had replied, at least up until this point, quite a bit on the 3-point line. Any other numbers from the Florida State game you want to point out from the team numbers?
Well, a couple of things I'll point out there on the threes. Florida State didn't hit a three after the first quarter. Yep. They were 0 for 8 from the second quarter on. And I guess I look at it from the flip side. The 38%, 39%, okay. But if you take Lene's 3 for 3 out, they're 4 for 15.
That's true.
They did not shoot it very well, including Shea, who was 1 for 5. Yeah. So, that's, with that. The other number I wanted to point out here was Indiana free throw percentage. I can live with it being above 70%, 71% on the game, 15 to 21. We got to the line quite a bit. Yeah. But you felt like in a close game, every miss just kind of got magnified. Now, luckily, they were missing some too, but you look at you look at the kids that I would really want on the line in a crucial part of the game. Lene and Shea were combined 7 for 7. And then you throw, and I will say this, Adesinoyen, I thought you made a good point about the bench. I'll back up here. Adesinoyen probably for me had her best game in the Florida State game. Unfortunately, she fouled out, but she had 8 points and 2 rebounds in 12 minutes. So and she was 3 for 4 at the line. So those 3 combined were 10 for 11 at the free throw line. So that's, you like seeing that.
That's right. Nguyen also hit a 3 as well. So threw that in there. So yeah, that's what I was trying to say with 3, at least collectively as a team, they were better than what they were the first 3 games. So yes, thanks a lot to Lene on that one. I think other than that, on the team numbers for me, Jeff, nothing really stuck out. We were really even with all the other runs. Rebounds, almost the exact same. Offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, second chance points, bench points. I guess we should mention our turnovers are, better at 13, which was way better than the 28 we had. So back down to what we would expect around our average. Bench points were almost even. Points in the paint were almost even. The only slight edge we had was in fast break points, 8 for us and 3 for them. So otherwise, you go down the box score, it was really fairly even. And I think what helped us is, a lot of those threes that we did make, even though, I agree, 39% is not necessarily where you want to be, but it's just so much better than where we had been. It felt great to me at the time. So thanks for raining on my parade.
I'm not trying to rain on the parade. I just said, but I think you look at this team, it is not, even though they want to be able to shoot the 3. I'm not sure this is as consistent a team as we're used to seeing the last few years between a Sydney Parrish, a Shea Chesky, a Sarah Scalia, now Lene had a good night there against Florida State, had a great night tonight as well. But I'm not sure it's quite the consistency of what we're used to. And I think that's going to be the frustration when we look at some of the 3-point numbers, especially as we go through the season. I don't have any other team numbers here. I don't know what about you.
Nope, I don't either. Let's go ahead and move on to individual, and we can do that by giving out our game ball, which you can go first, but I think this will probably be a pretty quick and easy discussion on who gets the game ball. But before we jump right into it, just a recap of our first 3 games. Shea Chesky got 2 and Big Z got 1 game ball. So that's where our game ball standings are in the year so far. So Jeff, do you want to point out anyone before you go ahead and give us your vote for game ball, or anyone else you want to have honorable mention for?
Well, I think you got to bring Shea into the conversation here. 22 points, 3 rebounds. She did foul out, and she had 3 assists, but she also had 5 turnovers, which led she was the co-lead on the team. To a certain degree, I think you at least got to give Big Z at least an honorable mention here. She had a double-double, 11 points, 13 rebounds, but she also had 5 turnovers along with 2 assists and a steal. So with that, but for me, again, partially a little bit of a bias probably, but I felt like Lene was our best player on Sunday against Florida State. 23 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist. She did turn it over twice, but she played 36 minutes. And as we mentioned already, was 8 for 12 from the field, including 3 of 3 from behind the arc and 4 of 4 at the line. So I'm going to go with Lene Beaumont.
Yeah, this was an easy one. There's a career night for Lene. I thought she came out and was way more aggressive and looking for her shot. She found her range with the 3 for 3, and of course, perfect from the line, like you already mentioned. It was interesting too. Again, like she was the interview. So again, this week, if you haven't listened on Inside Indiana, Austin Render did a full hour show with Coach Morin and then followed up with a player interview with Lene Beaumont. And he was asking her some questions about the Florida State game. And she mentioned, and I'm quoting because I thought it was a funny quote. She said, yeah, Coach and I, after the Marshall game, sat down and, we had a friendly chat, Austin. And I understood what she was asking of me. So I thought that was interesting. So whatever Coach Morin said to her after the Marshall game really must have stuck and resonated with
Shoot the ball.
Shoot the ball, be more aggressive. We need you on offense, which is same things we were kind of saying in our post-game wrap-up of those two games as well with the UIC and Marshall game. And so it was good to see her coming out and be aggressive and the team finding her, and to have a career night like that was just well-deserved. So for me, this was an easy one to give our game ball to.
All right, so that'll be Lene's first one.
First one for the year. That's right. All right, we'll move on now to the Grace Berger Hardest Worker Award. And in our 3 games, we've had 3 different players that have gotten it. So Lene, Shea Chesky, and Big Z have all gotten our Grace Berger Hardest Worker. So Jeff, this one's a little harder for me, but why don't you go first, and let's see if we can talk through it and come to an agreement on this one.
Well, we already mentioned Shea stats when talking about the game ball, so that's obviously consideration, at least for me, for the Grace Berger Hardest Worker. We also mentioned Odessa Noyen, who 8 points, 2 rebounds, fouled out to go along with her 1 block. I'm actually going to go here with Big Z. I'm going to go Big Z here. 11 points, 13 rebounds. She only had 2 fouls. All right, so that to me is a plus. She had 2 assists. She did commit a co-team high 5 turnovers, and she had a steal. She had one of the 3 steals the team had. So I'm going to go with Big Z because of the double-double.
Yeah, that sounds good, Jeff. Those are all I was thinking as well for me. I'm definitely voting for Big Z as well. She was who I landed on for all the same reasons that you said. Plus, she was also plus 12. Highest on the team. I do want to give an honorable shout out to Journey Kiyaku. I know I talked about her in my game opening, podcast opening with the her play in the last 15 seconds. I couldn't quite get there to vote for her just because she ended up only playing 6 minutes, but I thought her 6 minutes were really valuable. And I'm hoping we'll talk a little bit more about her in each of the games, because I thought we saw more of her earlier on in this Butler game before we had the foul trouble. So I'm hoping that coach is maybe going to rely on her a little bit more, because I really like what I see from her on the floor. I think she plays, well under control. She's got a little more experience than we could, see obviously from Nevaeh Caffey and Phoenix Stotine. So I really like what I saw from Journey in those 6 minutes. So just an honorable shout out to her. So, but I agree with you. We'll give Big Z her second hardest worker award for the year. So Jeff, now we're going to backtrack and we're going to do the same kind of game recap and everything for the Butler game. So that game obviously was just played here tonight, and a lot less tight game than the Florida State game for sure. And definitely a nice revenge game after Butler beat us last year. So where do you want to start on this game? What kind of stuck out to you in terms of themes or things you want to talk about?
First thing I want to talk about is turnovers. The first half, we had 11 turnovers. I'm not trying to downplay Butler because that was a WNIT team last year, but you can't turn it, in my opinion, you can't be turning it over 11 times in the first half against Butler. You have to value the ball a little bit better. And it was really a combination of players. It wasn't really any one player. Yeah. But I'm going to talk. I think I'm going to save this for my next go around. I'll come back maybe the second half. But the other big recap I had from the first half, Lene Beaumont, have a game, girl.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
in the first half.
Those were 2 of the big themes I saw as well. And then we ended up with 20 turnovers on the night and only forced 13. So I didn't like those lopsided numbers. I understand, we won pretty handily, but, you and other coaches I always hear talking, you coach to perfection, and there's always things that you can clean up, and that the turnovers were yet again, that's something that hopefully doesn't become a theme, but this is now our second of 5 games where we've seen these kind of turnovers from the team. And, Butler, I understand last year they were WNIT team, but they only had one starter returning from last year as well. And so they've, hopefully, well, be able to put it together, but I don't think they're quite there yet. They were 2-2 coming in. And so I didn't expect us to have so much trouble hanging on to the ball tonight. The other kind of theme, again, I will put a pin in because it's only game 2 out of 5, but the fouls, again, we had no one foul out, at least in this game. But again, we had 22 fouls, not the 28, but still 22. And we had 3 players with 4 fouls in this game. And so that's something, just to watch, I think, in my opinion, anyway, to see if that starts to become a theme or if these 2 games are just anomalies and they can figure out how to adjust to the officiating or if the officiating changes on us too, which we know it can do as we get into conference play. So just a couple of things to kind of, put a pin in and keep an eye on. What other kind of themes stuck out to you in the game from tonight?
Well, this is where I'm going to kind of pick on some players. And then right now it's the point guard position. And one of the things that bothered me tonight on the BTN Plus broadcast was how he kept talking about the 3-headed scoring monster. Yeah. I want more than 3. Yeah. Especially at the college Division I level, I think you should really have. Are you going to have 5 double-digit scores? No. Would it be nice? Yes. But we're not getting much beyond Big Z, Shea, and Lene right now. If you look at tonight even, those 3 combined for 45 of the 72. So a little bit more off the bench tonight. But tonight, and I even go back to the Florida State game here real quick. Nevaeh Caffey, 5 points. Journey had the 2, but Phoenix Stotine had 0 in 20 minutes. Tonight, Phoenix Stotine, 0 points in 25 minutes. And Journey Kyaku had 0 points in 10 minutes. And Nevaeh Caffey had 4 points in 25 minutes. Now, again, I'll be the first to admit as a coach, there are ways to impact the game besides simply scoring. But essentially, your point guard tonight got you 4 points. And because that's essentially what they are. Those 3 are basically running the point guard position. Yep. And you're not getting much from there. And the other problem is there also been games where they've been turning it over a lot. So they're not exactly putting up huge assist numbers to make up for the lack of scoring. And so there are times where I really feel like the offense gets in trouble because it's so loaded right now toward 3 primary scorers. But until, like I said earlier, somebody's got to step up and be that 4 scorer. Now, tonight it was Kadlikova a little bit, but she really hadn't been doing much. So I'm looking for, and tonight especially was one of those kind of frustrating things from that position. It was, like I said, Kadlikova Kadlikova only had 6 tonight.
She only had 6.
She had 6. I was looking at the wrong column. Her plus minus was 16. I was in the wrong column. She only had 6. So 2 of your starters only got 10 points. I need more from our starters. And tonight I felt better about the bench play because we played team. We mentioned Phoenix Stotine played 25 minutes. Maya Makaluski played 16. Kyaku 16 or 10 minutes. Nguyen played 18. So we played 4 players off the bench, double-digit minutes. That's what I want to see. So the good part, playing players and getting them double-digit minutes, they've got to produce now when they get on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. I do want to reiterate what you're saying. I think that the bench definitely played better tonight, and I didn't feel like they got all of the minutes strictly because of fouling in this case, or because of even our big lead, because a lot of them got in earlier into the first half, where historically I think we've seen Coach Morin wait until even, 2 minutes to go into the left in the game before they put people in. She did that a little bit, at least we got Chloe Spreen and Faith Wiseman in with, a little over 4 minutes to go. But back to what we were talking about, if, don't make me regret you getting put in. In fact, I looked at my husband after they got put in, and the first 3 possessions after, we pretty much put most of our bench players in those last 4 minutes, we had a missed shot led down to on the defensive end and a wide open 3 that Butler put in. We went down and had the ball stolen away from us. Then Butler hit another shot. We came back down again, and we had to travel on our end. And all of a sudden, within, they put the backups in with 4.5 minutes to go, and within 1 minute, there was like a 5 or 6 point swing towards Butler. And I looked at Sean. I said, "Well, if they want to play more than 4 minutes, they got to not make Coach Moore and regret it." And so, there's maybe starting to see why they're a little bit farther down on the bench, because I think they do need some polishing. But the other bench players I thought were great. In fact, Stotine played 25 minutes, but Nguyen was kind of the star of the bench for me. I thought she came in, ended up playing more than Big Z, because I think tonight was another game Big Z got into some foul trouble. She ended up with 4, but Nguyen ended up playing more minutes than Big Z, and with 18, and put up almost as many minutes or points. She had 8, and becoming our 4th highest scorer. And then Makaleski came in, put up 16 minutes and put 7 points in there. So those 2 players off the bench, and to your point, outscored 2 of our starters. And so, at least that helped a bit. I absolutely agree with you. If you take our point guard as a whole in terms of offensive production, it's not there. But Jeff, let me ask you a question as a coach. What I like to watch from all 3 of those ladies that play at the point, I think they really play exceptionally hard on the defensive end. Caffey in particular always picks up, her player 94 feet from the basket. Do you think that has impact on their offensive production because they're expending so much energy on the defensive end? I know that's not an excuse, but I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are for
Caffey. For Caffey, it may be as a freshman, and we've talked a little bit about this before with some of the freshmen that we thought were going to be able to come in and contribute right away, and they struggle shooting the ball. I think a lot of that stems from the weight training, the strength and conditioning really kind of throws them off a little bit on their shots, because they're getting stronger, they're getting more definition, more tone. And even for a really, really good high school player, they're not used to the strength and the conditioning they're going to get at the high school level, unless they are just at a premier program, which I doubt most of them are coming in terms of S&C. I think you can make that argument, Kathy, but I think you still got to you got to find a way to put numbers up, in the scoring column. And again, Caffey only took 4 shots. I'll say that. Now I'll go back to your point about the bench. Chloe and Faith played 4 minutes. They were both -9 on plus minus. And again, we know plus minus can be a skewed stat, but in this case, it kind of does talk to what you're talking about, that, hey, they came on the floor and all of a sudden here Butler's making a run on them. Now, did it matter in the scheme of the game? No, but that's what it was. But but for Stotine and Kyaku, picking up full court, I don't think should be as big a deal. They're veterans. They should be able to understand how to play offense and defense and kind of separate the 2.
Right. That's it. I was just kind of curious what you've kind of experienced with that. And Stotine, again, I mean, if you're going to play 25 minutes, she took 5 shots and missed all 5, and didn't, she did have at least a game. Team high 4 assists. So, she's helping us there. I think her defense is fine. It's just, again, like 0 for 5 is not something I want to see from somebody playing 25 minutes either. So
now one third thing real quick, Kathy,
Yep.
Let's give them kudos. Good start for once, or at least the one game that I've noticed where they got off to, a good start. They were up 23-7 at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I thought they were they seemed control of this game from start to finish. The 7-23 to start the first quarter was a really nice start to this game. So they built that nice cushion to be able to at least get a lot more time for the bench. So I didn't really have any other big themes, Jeff, but did you have anything else any other points you want to make sure we talk about?
Second half, I just thought that, there was a part of that where I felt like they kind of coasted. And I know that's not the word that probably should be used, but it was like they had a nice lead at the half. And I felt like coming out in the second half, they were just kind of like, okay, we got a lead. Let's just kind of maintain the lead where we're at. We're up 19 or whatever we were at the half. It was 44-25. Yeah, so they were up 19 at the half. Because this kind of felt like, and then they made a little run toward the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, got it up to as much as 30, I think, at one point. But first half to me was the game. And that's where I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Yep. Good. All right. That sounds good. Well, let's move on to the numbers then. Jeff, I'll let you go ahead and go first again, since you're co-host today. What number for you especially stuck out here?
Well, you already talked about turnovers, or we both actually talked about turnovers. You mentioned, I think, fouls already. So I'm going to go 3-point shooting for IU. 56% from beyond the arc, 9 of 16. They were 7-11 in the first half. 7-11. Now, interestingly, they only shot 5 in the second half. They were 2 for 5. So the rate dropped off a lot in the second half. And they only scored 28 points too in the second half. But 9 of 16, 56%. Definitely what I'm not saying we're going to shoot 56% every game, but I like the volume, and obviously a percentage like that really makes me happy.
Yep, that was exactly the one I was going to go at, and 52% total from the field, I think, is great. And then, like I mentioned, on the flip side, we only allowed Butler to even shoot 5 for 15 from 3 at 33% as well. Now, candidly, I don't know if Butler this year is relying on 3 like I knew Florida State had been, but still to keep them, in the low 30s or even below 30%, which is really good from our defense. In fact, overall, I thought our defense played really well. It'd be nice to see if that defense could force a few more than the 13 turnovers that they did and turn those into more offensive production. But overall, I thought our defense did a nice job holding them overall to 33% shooting. So those were some of the big numbers. Otherwise, I felt, again, it was a fairly evenly matched game if you go down the list until you get to the defensive rebounds, where we had 10 more defensive rebounds than them, 33-23. So that was nice to see us being able to help with on that defensive rebounding side. So any other numbers, Jeff, that jumps off the page for you want to talk through?
I guess for me, Kathy, and again, Big Z got in some foul trouble tonight, but again, as you mentioned, Noyan came in and played pretty well. We didn't dominate points in the paint. We didn't, we barely won points off turnovers, second chance points, Butler actually. So kind of those specialty stats, it's starting to be one of those things that's I'm kind of getting, it's like, is this what's going to be all year, where we're just kind of playing even in these specialty stats? We're not really dominating, so are we really a paint team? Are we a transition team? Fast break points was 7 to 5 Butler. What's our identity, I guess, besides Shea Chesky and Lene Beaumont at this point? What still is kind of the identity of this team, I think will remain, is what we're all kind of waiting to find out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only one that's really jumping out to me is our defense. I think our defense has been pretty good in all 5 games, but there's nothing on the offensive side, to your point, that's jumping out going, oh, this is definitely where I know we're going to get our points, other than, like you say, the Beaumont Chesky show. So I guess we'll see if something kind of comes out in the wash as this team continues to gel. So just trying to remind myself it is a fairly young and new team together. So it's hard though, because I want to start drawing some extrapolations more from the 5 games that we've seen so far. Any other numbers, Jeff? I don't think I have any.
Nope, that's good.
All right. Well, let's move on then to our game ball. Jeff, again, do you want to go first on this one? Again, Shea Chesky has 2, Big Z has 1, and as we just talked about with the Florida State game, Beaumont has 1 on the year.
And I think we're going to create a tie here. I'm going Lene Beaumont. She had 19 of her 21 in the first half. She was 6 of 9 from the field, including 4 of 5 from 3, and including a bank in 3 that I really want to know if she called. And she was 5 of 6 at the line. She had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, did commit 3 turnovers, but did have a steal in only 27 minutes. That was the other nice thing. I guess we should go back to the numbers real quick. Nobody played more than 30 minutes. Yes. Thank you. All right. And Lene was a team high. Lene was a team high plus 25. So I'm going Lene here.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I meant to mention that too. In the numbers, 29 was the highest we had, and that was Shea Chesky in terms of minutes. But yeah, well, this is another easy one. I know, she scored 19 of her 21 in the first half. But again, if you watched Lene on the floor, even when she's not necessarily scoring like she was in the first half, she is doing so many other small things, getting them together for huddles during the timeouts, being vocal and being that leader that we've been really wanting and lacking attacking, I think, for in last year. And it was great to see that. And so that would be what I would encourage our listeners to really watch is even when Beaumont is not scoring and really producing like we saw in the first half in terms of offensive points, she is doing so many things that have a huge impact on this game that this was an easy one for me to give her our game ball. So that's her second game ball on the year, 2 in a row. So congratulations to Lene Beaumont on that. Now we'll switch back to the Grace Berger hardest worker with this one. Big Z leads us with 2. Shay Chesky and Lene Beaumont each have 1. Jeff, I think this one can go in a number of different ways. I think I have a name in my head, but let's see if you sway me. Who do you have for your hardest worker in this one?
For me, there was only one person here, and that's Shay Chesky. We're going to create a tie here with, for me anyway, Shay Chesky, 14 points. 8 rebounds, her scoring 5 of 12 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, 2 of 3 at the line. But again, it had 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal in that 29 minutes. She did have 3 turnovers. Again, I can live a little bit with the turnover if they're doing other things. And that's what I think at least that's what Lene and Shay are doing. So I guess you could maybe talk about Big Z here, but it was 10 points, 6 rebounds. And then, like you said, she only played 17 minutes. I'm going Shay here.
Yeah. For me, the 2 people I had in my head were Shay Chesky and that's who again I landed on. So I'll just talk about who I want to give my honorable mention to, and that's Odessa Noyan. Again, I thought she came in her 18 minutes and just did a nice job for us off of the bench. When tonight I didn't think it was a great game for Big Z. I know she ended up with 10 points, but I thought when they were doubling her, especially, she was struggling with it. I thought she was struggling on the defensive end, as we saw with the 4 fouls, and then it led to only 17 minutes. So for me, my honorable mention is Odessa Noyan. I think that it's great, but it's hard not to give it to Shay Chesky, especially again when you see a guard leading our team in rebounds. And again, the things that don't show up in the stat line are some of the reasons I landed on her. And namely for me with Shay Chesky was her defense tonight. I thought some of the fouls she got called on were a little questionable, but she only had 2 of them, which was fine. But I thought she did a nice job on the defensive end as well. So we'll make that unanimous between the 2 of us, and we will give Shay Chesky her second hardest worker of the year. So Jeff, any other things before we move on to around the Big Ten and our upcoming opponent? Anything else from these 2 games before we leave them behind and move on?
Nope.
All right, then. So just a quick update, real quick on some of the games that have occurred or are coming up around the Big Ten. I just picked out some of the more notable matchups. So last Thursday, number UCLA beat number 11 North Carolina 78-60. That Saturday, number 14 Michigan soundly beat number 18 Notre Dame 93-54. So keep an eye on Michigan. They've been making some noise and handily beating all of their opponents in 4, and that included now Notre Dame. We had the battle for the real SC, and USC lost that to South Carolina 69-52. I had mentioned this one, even though Ohio State's not ranked, just to see what might have happened, but nothing good for Ohio State. Lost to UConn 68-100. And then a couple upcoming games that might be of interest. Tomorrow night, number 21 Iowa plays number 7 Baylor. Number 8 USC plays number 18 Notre Dame. Number 14 Michigan plays number 1 UConn on Friday. So that might be an interesting matchup to see if Michigan can continue their hot streak that they're on. But Jeff, with that, let's switch over to our upcoming opponents. Do you have any thoughts, though, on the Big Ten first?
Yeah, I agree with you about Michigan, but I also wanted to pass along Minnesota, a team that we kind of figure IU may be in the mix with. Lost at Kansas tonight. Trying to get that score again real quick. 63-57. What's notable about that is Minnesota had been running roughshod over by up to tonight. The least amount of points they had scored coming in tonight was 88.
Okay.
And Kansas held them to 57. I think that's going to be a little more what you see of Minnesota in Big Ten play against, especially the above average to really good teams. But I wanted to pass that score along because I think that's indicative of a team that Indiana's going to possibly be battling with for seeding in the Big Ten tournament and maybe, where you end up in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, Jeff, let's talk about Florida Gulf Coast. I'll be honest, I haven't seen a whole lot of them. So we play them on Tuesday, November 25th. That will be on ESPN Plus. I love this game time because, nobody works on Tuesday before Thanksgiving, but it's at 1:00 Eastern. So hopefully for those of you who have ESPN Plus and you have to work like myself, you can watch the replay later on that night. But right now, Florida Gulf Coast is 1-1 with a win over Ave Maria and a loss to Davidson. Jeff, sorry. And they do play George Mason tonight. I'll look up if that game is finished or not. But do you want to talk about who their leading scorers and rebounders in and anything else you might know about them?
I know nothing about them, but they are being led in scoring by Katrina Gordon with 13.5 points per game. And they have 3 other players with double digits and with that. So, and then their leading rebounder, all of a sudden my computer is going haywire here. So hopefully you can still hear me. You may not be able to see me, but hopefully you still hear me. And their leading rebounder they have 2 people tied at 7.5 rebounds a game, Jordan Campbell, who comes off the bench, and Nay Staton, who both average 7.5 rebounds. So, that's really what we know about Florida Gulf Coast. Now, this is a program that has been a tournament team on a pretty regular basis coming out of that league that they're in. I think it's the Big South, but don't quote me. But it looks like maybe at least a little bit of at least a rough start, or maybe a down year this year for Florida Gulf Coast by their standards. But I like this game because then also later on next week, they go in and play in that tournament in Florida with the 4-team tournament, and that we'll talk a little bit about on next week's show.
Yeah. Real quick, they lost that game tonight to George Mason. They only put up 41 points. They lost that game 41-58. So yeah, it doesn't look like they're a real high scoring team either. So I can look real quick at some of their previous games.
Well, I'm trying to pull it up. I think it's the Big South.
Okay.
I think it's the Big South, but I'm trying to see what their overall record is.
Yeah, they're now 1-2. They lost to Davidson 51-77. They beat Ave Maria 92-37. Take that for what it's worth. And then they lost that game to George Mason tonight. So yeah, they've only played the 3 games so far this year.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, with that, let's just go ahead and do final thoughts, and then we'll talk about what's up next. So Jeff, why don't you kick us off?
At this point, 5-0, you're 5-0, and that's better than the alternative. And I feel like, I know we sounded kind of negative at points tonight. I'm not trying to be negative, just trying to point out things I feel like we need to improve, but I do think they're fixable. And I think that's the really bright side. Whereas I feel like, again, I don't want to keep doing this all year, but I think that whereas there were times last year, I didn't feel they were fixable. I think this year, the things they got that we're talking about, the per se, the weaknesses or the flaws are still fixable at this point. So I'm really excited to see where this team goes over the next, about 10 days as we go play Florida Gulf Coast and then play those 2 teams down in that tournament in Florida before we get to December. I really am excited about these next 10 days.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, I agree with that, Jeff. I think everything's fixable. And to, to their credit, honestly, I feel like the last 2 games felt better to me than the first 2 games. Like the first couple of games, especially it was at the UIC game where it just felt like we were really struggling there for a while. Was the first half, especially, was just some really bad basketball. So, I didn't think there was anything spectacular, nothing that, makes me think we're going to all of a sudden start competing with UCLA for, the top of the Big Ten. But at the end of the day, I felt like we have played better and more complete games the last couple of games that we did starting out the year. So to me, that's progress, and that's what we want to see. And to your point, the problems that we're seeing feel fixable to me as well. I don't think necessarily that, hopefully we won't be still talking about, turnovers or fouling here when we get into, 10 more games into the year. So me, I agree. I think we've made some progress already this year, and I look forward to seeing the next ones, especially when we get down, we'll be playing Gonzaga and then either Iowa State or Marquette down in Fort Myers. So excited. Well, I guess we won't see those games because I think they're on lovely Flow Hoops, but to listen to those games and hear what Austin might have to say about them. So for me, looking forward to the next few games as well. So those are my final thoughts as well. All right. Well, we'll talk about here real quick what's up next. So for Jeff and I, we will return on Wednesday, November 26th. We will be only covering the Florida Gulf Coast game that night in terms of games. That's the only one between now and next Wednesday. But we will highlight the next opponents, which we know for sure are Gonzaga. And then, like I mentioned, it will be either Iowa State or Marquette. So we'll be going over that. So just a reminder, the Florida Gulf Coast game is on Tuesday, November 25th on ESPN+. Jeff and I will talk about it on Wednesday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on that Wednesday. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find that at youtube.com/@BackHomeNetwork. You can also be part of our private community. Find out more about that at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Riggs Design for designing our logos. Thank you to Bob Thompson for the music you heard through the broadcast. Thanks for Jeff being my always diligent and reliable partner here on Doing the Work. And most of all, thank you all for listening, whether you're listening live to us right now or after the fact on your podcast viewing of choice. But we'll be back to talk with you about IU hoops next week. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers. All right. Good job. Well,
let's wrap this up. It's a late night already.
Yes, good. I'm good. I don't have any after hour thoughts. Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to touch on?
No, I just, not really. Just, haven't watched much outside of the IU games for the women. So I'm trying to catch up a little bit, or find some, but so I was kind of interested in watching Kansas tonight. And Lily was playing. I don't know what her stats were, but she was playing quite a bit when I watched. So,
yeah, awesome.
So good for her.
In the same way, hopefully I'll be able to catch a few more games over break next week that are of interest. So, all right, Jeff, we'll have a wonderful night and good night to everybody. And good night to my mom. I'm sure she's still out there listening. Night, Mama.
Night, everybody.